Hello everyone and welcome back to the GeekWave. This is the low budget show. It's the show so low. Has no budget. Unlike the video game industry, which has an infinite amount of resources because, surprisingly, it's like one of the most profitable things in the world. I don't know. I'm not a video game guy, but we're going to talk video games today because, I don't know. The last Ronin video game got me kind of excited, and I started thinking about stuff like, hey, what if we made more video games based on comic books? Because maybe that's like an easier sell to some people than doing a movie based on that character. I don't know. It's very weird. We could get into it more. We do have news to talk about a little bit. Things that I feel like are worth mentioning, kind of because these are things that were already like established and don't really have connection to the WGA SAG-AFTRA stuff. Like these things were going to happen no matter what. So I wanted to talk about a couple of news pieces. Then we could talk about the video game industry, something I am a huge, knowledgeable boy of. Know everything about it. You know me. I do my Let's Plays, and I don't know anything. I don't know anything about video games. But we'll talk about it anyways, What's the last video game I played to completion? I don't know. Have I beat all the Arkham games? It doesn't matter. I can't remember. An arcade game, probably. I have played Snake more recently than anything else. So there you go. So I'm the perfect guy to have this conversation with, obviously. But no, we do have a couple of pieces of news. It's been very hard for me trying to find, anything worth of note to talk about in these news pieces just because everything's shifting. This culture is breaking apart, and the entertainment world at large is very strange and disorienting at the moment, but whatever. Couple of things to talk about. The I guess official reveal for a new leg, a new prequel in between of the MonsterVerse stuff. So the MonsterVerse, of course, that is the latest iteration of Godzilla and King Kong. They've had four movies between them. Godzilla 2014, Kong Skull Island, Godzilla King of the Monsters, and then Kong v Godzilla. Next year, in May, I believe it is the the Lost World New World Order or something. The New World, something like that. But before that comes out, I guess before it comes out, Apple TV has shown off their first reveal for their new prestigious streaming show, which is aptly called Monarch: Legacy of Monsters. No official release date. I mean, is it coming this year? I think they might wait to do it after the new movie, but essentially, following the thunderous battle between Godzilla and the Titans that leveled San Diego, and the shocking revelation that monsters are real, Monarch: Legacy of Monsters tracks two siblings following in their father's footsteps to uncover their family's connection to the secretive organization known as Monarch. Clues lead them into the world of monsters and ultimately down the rabbit hole to Army Officer Lee Shaw, played by Kurt Russell and Wyatt Russell, taking place in the 50s and half a century later, where Monarch is threatened by what Shaw knows. The dramatic saga spanning 3 generations reveals buried secrets and the ways that epic earth-shattering event can destroy the world. Whatever. Okay. Here's what's cool about that. Couple of things. First thing that's cool. A Godzilla piece set in the 50s. That's where the character started. I love that. Very cool. The other thing that's cool. Kurt and Wyatt Russell playing the same character. We don't have to de-age either of them. We don't have to age up either of them. It's just a son and a dad playing the same character. Genius. Utterly genius. That is so cool because they are both talented. And also, if it's half a century later, that's the 2000s. So Kurt Russell's character, I'm guessing, will be in the 2000s because he's 76 right now. So that's 20 years off of then. So he'd probably be dead in the present timeline, where his kid, I guess, is investigating stuff like that. Look, if you're going to do a Godzilla TV show set in the MonsterVerse, there's no way we're doing a Godzilla fight every week. I know we're not doing that. There have been still images depicting Godzilla will be in this show, which is very exciting, and they look crisp and clear. And I do think Apple's in a good place right now with like what the content they have produced. Not necessarily the residuals, but this is kind of exciting. I'm very hesitant on this show solely because it could easily fall apart. I say that loosely, but I mean, this type of show, there is the possibility that this just doesn't work. But I will always want to see what Kurt Russell's been up to. I think he's one of like the last of that generation that has like a very charismatic prominence, and I appreciate that. And Wyatt Russell freaking rips, so that's cool. I like to see what he's up to, and they're playing the same guy. Sure, he looks a lot like his dad, but different enough where you could like distinct him from something else. So I appreciate that a lot. I think this could be very fascinating. Is it going to work? Yet to be determined, but it could be fun. Could be fun. I don't know. Very hard to get excited. I am excited for the new Godzilla and Kong team up, whatever. I'm very curious to see like what this new villain's gonna be. I don't know. There's just so much about those. Like I'm trying to think now. Do I like them more than I hate them? Because I did like Godzilla, like the original 2014. It might be my least favorite of the bunch, but I liked it. Kong was okay. I didn't hate that. King of the Monsters was fine. I guess I just like the idea of the characters. And I want to see them executed properly. But hey, suddenly Apple TV's got a huge budget for everything because we got a Scorsese film and a Ridley Scott film coming out this year from them too. So like, what are they doing? I don't know. But that is not the only piece of news we're going to be talking about this week, because it was revealed today via the Nintendo, I guess this does fit into like the topic we're doing because it's a video game, via Nintendo's X account or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, that Charles Martinet will no longer be voicing Mario. He has been voicing the character pretty much since the character has been able to speak in the way that Mario does. I would argue that it's one of the best bits of voice animation ever created, and that he created an iconic voice just with like 2 words pretty much. Let's go. Woohoo, mamma mia. Like he did it. He made that. So there's an announcement that came out. He won't be voicing the character going forward. No update or like no knowledge of like what could be replacing that or whatever, but he's going to be a Mario ambassador now, meaning he will just show up and be like, yeah, Mario rips. What's up, guys? Come on. That's like the dream job, I think. Hey, I'm just going to show up and I'm going to be the character. But he wasn't just Mario. He did Luigi and he did Wario. Like, he was doing all of the characters for a very long time and became like their voice. He is their voice. Now, this to me does not read that Chris Pratt is taking over the role. No, I do not think for a second that is going to happen. I just don't know what's going to happen. A sound-alike, maybe. My first reaction, like, hearing this was like, oh no, is he sick? Did something happen to Charles? Like, was there like some controversy about him? But the guy's been doing it for 30 years. He's 67 years old. I'm going to imagine that can be a strain on the voice. And when you're getting to that age, you don't need the work. If they just want to like wheel you out and like you talk about how cool the character is, that in itself is cool too. It's like, I think like there's a couple of like those guys left where you're like, it's amazing that they've been doing it for so long and that nobody's really replaced them. Peter Cullen is another one where you're like, this guy has been Optimus Prime for like decades upon decades, and you can never really do it better. So trying to replace that's going to be very challenging. But you can't argue with the work that Charles put in here. Like, it's prolific. It's prominent. Everybody knows what he did. And the fact that he loves it and he's proud of it and just supports what he was accomplished, like that's amazing. So he will be missed. He's obviously not going to be straying away from the property, but retiring from the role. It sounds like it's on his own terms too. So that's pretty cool. So there's 2 video games coming out soon. There's the Super Mario Bros. Wonder and WarioWare 3 or something that he won't be doing the voices for. So no word on replacement, but that's pretty sick. Like, congrats to the guy for having like such a prolific career doing this. Seems cool, you know? What a guy. That's pretty sick. I mean, 67 is kind of young, but it doesn't sound like they phased him out because there's no way they'd get Chris Pratt to do it, right? There's no way he's going to be doing it the whole time. Maybe like, you know, I could see it like if they get like the Japanese voice actor who maybe did like what the Super Mario movie was like overseas or something. Maybe that's the guy they'll get to replace him, but that's pretty cool. So from like 1991 to 2023, he's been doing that. That's a long time. That's really cool. Good for him. And with that, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll start talking more about video games and something I know a lot about, comic books. You know, it's kind of interesting that there's like a divide, but still slight crossover between the comic book and video game genre. Like, both have their fans that are like true to the material, know all the lore, and are knowledgeable in every aspect of the thing. There's some slight crossover in terms of the audience. Like, a lot of video game people I know are like, that's their thing. There isn't the huge connect with comic book sides. And I think more like it could be more like comic book people are more versatile and go into those things. Of course, comic books are like a smaller demographic, and it's more like it's weird to say niche because it's not really like niche because everybody knows what a comic book is. But it's still like a smaller aspect. We're not dealing with like the billions of dollars of the video game world here. But if you were to take the concept of a comic book, it does work for a video game. You have a protagonist and a character. You can go on different missions because, you know, a lot of comic books are serialized, so you can do independent stories and thoughts and that kind of thing. It works endlessly and over again. And we are kind of seeing a resurgence of that in modern times, you know? We are getting that new Hellboy video game coming out very soon. There are countless Spider-Man, Wolverines, and Superman, and Batman, and whatever games being worked on and coming out all the time. Injustice, one of the most profitable versions of DC Comics characters. The crossover is there. The characters can work there. There are DLCs in Mortal Kombat where you could play as like Peacemaker and Homelander and stuff. Like, there is clearly an interest for that to go there. And there's really interesting examples of that being like very popular. Of course, there's always going to be like an Alien game and a Predator game. Those ones are very big. Star Wars, of course, too, is kind of in that same bubble. And we even try some like different ones, because you remember like The Wolf Among Us, like the Fables video game. I remember that because I'm like, that was such a interesting idea. Because Fable's my favorite comic book, and just being like, yeah, Telltale was like, we're going to do it. And they did it, and it was like, that's kind of interesting. Like, they tried that. I mean, who would look at Fables and be like, what if that was like, you know, a game? It's interesting. But like, yeah, I guess Bigby is kind of like perfect for that aesthetic. He's kind of like one of those like hard-boiled noir leads where you can do something fun. And he's one of those guys that just works as like a central figure for that world and that kind of aesthetic. There is a sequel to The Wolf Among Us coming out soon. I think it was pushed to 2024. But still, like, the characters, the world, it's something that works for video games. And that's cool. I love that a lot. And yes, we got Spider-Mans all the time, but there are other comic book properties that could easily work in that aesthetic. And you know what? There's a lot of like creators for video games that want to like make their own thing. Sometimes it's easier to sell IP. This is also just like an open platform to me just to go like, hey, here's some comic books that are like really cool and some characters that are like really cool. Maybe if we like put the push to them in video games, it's an easier sell than doing that character in a movie, because movies, not that they're like more expensive, video games are very expensive, but it's easier to sell like very specific characters in a video game because the audience will grow larger and larger with that, you know? And then you have those people that stream games all the time that be like, yeah, this is like a character from this book. And then you could do like some cross promotion and you could get like reprints of the book coming out, which is something that the movies should be doing. What I'll give props to James Gunn for currently in his DCU stuff is he's promoting books that you should read before anything gets actually worked on in that, like, you know, category of movie and stuff. But I made a list. It's not like expansive or it's not like a mind-blowing list. It's just a couple of concepts that I think could work for a video game. These are a couple comic books. Now, I didn't want to choose a Marvel or DC character solely because I'd have to imagine that all of those are up for consideration, and maybe that'll be a separate video to talk about what those could be. I wanted to choose more independent characters. No Ninja Turtles, no Transformers. Like, these are ones that are just like, these are popular stories in their own right, and they could serve as the basis for a video game, whatever that looks like. Now, the first one up is kind of like it's like a cluster of characters that I wanted to put into like one thing. I really do think, and I mean this for all of them, I really think like that original core of those first like actual concepts from Image Comics, all of those characters in those categories could work for a video game. A Spawn video game is a great idea. You have a huge lore, you have expansive characters, you could do multiple different types of power. He has an energy bar in the comic book. That is just straight up a video game thing. And you can have just like beautiful aesthetics and flowing capes and just big, crazy ideas. You can fight demons and angels and have different costumes for them. You could do different time periods if you want to do like a DLC and here's Gunslinger or here's She-Spawn, that kind of thing. Very expansive, a whole world to talk about in there. Spawn is, of course, a character McFarlane wants to turn into a movie. Of course he wants to make it into a movie today. It's Spawn. But a Spawn video game that's solely Spawn, and maybe Spawn has had a video game before. I have some characters on this list that could potentially have a video game, but I'm kind of talking about like today's modern type of game. You know, and Spawn perfectly fits that. That one works so well. I also feel the same way about Savage Dragon, where it's like, yeah, you could do like a procedural thing, like you're a cop on the beat and you're doing different types of stories. He is an iconic enough character. There's enough weird stuff happening in his world where there's a million like areas and concepts you could pull from and try new things with Savage Dragon. He just kind of rocks, you know, like all of those guys. Youngblood, not a concept I love immensely. But if you were to take the Youngbloods, you could do a kind of like a co-op game where you could like play between the different characters. You have a bunch of different types of characters. You got your muscle, your long range, your fighters. There's something there to explore. You could update them a lot too because their designs more than Spawn and Savage Dragon are very of the 90s, but you could modernize that up as best you want. I also feel the same way about Shadowhawk, a character that feels like in the current landscape of everything going on with Image kind of gets forgotten, like he doesn't have like his place anymore. But there is like a heritage where like you have a guy who's taking up the mantle of like the last type of hero from a certain era in Shadowhawk. So that could be like an Assassin's Creed thing if you wanted to, like different iterations of a Shadowhawk throughout time leading to the modern day. That could also be like very much an Arkham inspired game, like that aesthetic, that kind of movement, that type of fight. Another like, if you wanted to just make like a quick story, like a quick game, Batman-y adjacent, with just a little bit more like interesting ideas, Shadowhawk's the way to go. This character is very interesting, and there's stuff to explore there. I don't know, maybe there's something to look at in terms of Shadowhawk. I could see it. And Wildcats, look, I get it. It's kind of, again, with like the Youngbloods thing. You're like, yeah, clearly we could do a grifter video game. And since they're kind of like connected to DC now, it's not one I'd go to. I also have Gen 13 on my list because I'm like, yeah, like young heroes that like have specific powers. You could do something with that too. I don't necessarily think you should because it is kind of, again, connected to DC, but Wildcats and Gen 13, that is, those are characters people like. If you want to modernize them up a little bit, you could do something there. Now, I also want to point out, I didn't do any like you're playing as a Superman character. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see like the Homelander video game. I don't want to see the Omni-Man video game. Those all sound really boring and lame. So I didn't want to choose them. I want to choose different types of characters. Like Cyberforce. What if there was a Cyberforce? You know? 90s. Don't you love the 90s? And Wetworks. Yay. What if Wetworks? Cyberforce and Wetworks, they are just also of that era of like those guys. But a Spawn video game, a Savage Dragon video game, a Youngblood video game, Shadowhawk video game, any of those characters work for a video game. Early Image is ripe for that shit. Ripe for that shit. They'd be great at it, you know, like all of that would work. And here's another one I was kind of thinking of. This is kind of like, I don't know if it's like a forgotten gem of Image. Because it's not really like forgotten because it ran for like 80 issues and it went for a long time. But Elephant Men, like that is a concept that you could do something with, like animal hybrids, experiments in like a futuristic world. Like it's just straight, like there are a million games that have that aesthetic of just like a techno dystopian future. What could that look like? You could play, yeah, they're kind of like the freaky creatures that are destructive, but you could do separate missions in like a different type of world where you're playing as like anamorphic hippo or elephant or zebra or something. It all works, and it could be really cool. Like I I encourage people to read Elephant Men because it's a very interesting concept that is kind of different than what you're expecting. I won't say all of it's perfect, but there is something there that is fun to explore and has like the grit and the grime and the intensity of a video game. And like who, if you were to like, okay, here's the game. It's a dark dystopian future. You're like a weird soldier guy, but you're also like a mutated rhinoceros and a mutated giraffe. That alone could get you made, you know? Like that works for some people. I think that'd be kind of fun. Elephant Man's such a fascinating concept to me. Should I reread it? I feel like I'm going to reread it again. Good book. Bone. Oh, Bone. We have to talk about Bone for a second. Of course, Bone. You could do like a point and click adventure with Bone. You could take that aesthetic and like run wild with it. Like Bone is such a strong, interesting book and concept and series. And my goodness, the adventures you could have, like the fun comedic story that you could go down of Bone. Maybe you could even kind of do it if you wanted. Don't know why you would, because I think the fun would be playing as Phone Bone. But if you wanted to, you could create your own character, kind of do like a South Park aesthetic. If you like the South Park games, I don't love them, right? But if you're like, hey, you can create your own type of Bone and like go on adventures of like the friends and guys, and like that could be kind of fun, you know? That would be interesting. Like that concept, it's a great aesthetic. You can do so much of it, and you could try to go into so many interesting and different ways. Like that would be an incredible thing to see. Same with this one, Battle Pope. I had to put a Kirkman on here. Kirkman seems like one of those guys who is just like waiting for his things to branch off into bigger ways. And this is just a comedic game where you're a strong pope and you just go around being a strong pope. You know, it's just like, it's just a comedic angle of like the tough guy hero. You could try like a Duke Nukem kind of like just energy and that kind of vibe if you wanted to, where like that's the aesthetic we're going for, that's the feeling we're going for, that type of thing. You don't have to take it seriously. Like the Battle Pope is not a character. He's not a fun thing that people like, oh yeah, look at the intensity of this lore. Like we're having fun with religion and concepts like that. That type of just like mindless destruction that's kind of satirical, it just works for a video game. And it's just like that crossover thing that works. You know, I don't want to do Invincible. Everyone would want to do Invincible. And like, let's just have fun with it, you know? get weird, do something silly, try something different. Like, no one's gonna think of Battle Pope, but it could be fun. You just become a Battle Pope. What if you were the Battle Pope? Now, here's a weird one. I was just kind of thinking of, like, what's a insane game we could try to make? What about the Max? I feel like the Max is just like, maybe I'll get more popular as time goes on. But you could do like a different type of game where you like go between worlds. Obviously, you go between like, real life and the outback, and you could try something experimental with that aesthetic. It's just, again, you could play as like the girl. What's her name again? I can't remember. Or you could just play as the Max. Like, it doesn't matter. It's just like a fun, bulky, silly concept that could work and be fun and be silly and be crazy. But who knows? Do people like the Max? I think there's a couple on this list, like clearly like video game audience are already familiar with like Spawn and stuff. But if you were to like make a game on the Max, it does feel like one of those concepts where it'd be like, oh yeah, no, like I'd want to go back and read that book. I want to see like what the insanity is for that. I don't recommend the Max a lot to like new comic book fans. I do think it's just like strictly like when you've been in the weeds for a while, go try the Max. It's a very interesting concept. But there have been times where like people in my life who I know are very video game influenced will be like, early image might be something you dig. I think like that kind of world and like those types of characters, like that might be an area you want to explore more. Spawn has huge crossover with like video game aesthetic. The Max kind of does too, if you ask me. I think that could work really well. Same with this one, which is, I love this character and I love this concept, and this is like the type of like 2D animated game I would love to see. The Tick. Oh man. I love The Tick. It's one of the best concepts out there. It's just so fun and silly. I love the animated show. I love the Amazon show. I love the Warburton show. This character, you could do something insane with The Tick. I think that would be incredibly cool. Like, come on, The Tick. Like, you take that aesthetic, the colorful characters of that world. You could do kind of like, I don't want to say like a platform, but if you just did like a bigger scale thing, maybe even like a TMNT Shredder's Revenge, but like on a bigger scale, or an Earthworm Jim level aesthetic, or a Banjo-Kazooie level thing. Maybe you could do like co-op where you have like Arthur and the Tick you can play as, and you go on different missions. You could fight whoever. That would be so cool. Like the Tick, it's one of those characters again where I think the crossover is there, where the audience is there, and sometimes it just doesn't get like the love it deserves. But if we were to take that concept and be like, yeah, you can play as the Tick. Look at how like outlandish these villains are and how colorful they are. You want to see more of that world. I think it's very, very fun. This character just rules. Like there hasn't. I was gonna be like, is there one? It's like, no, there's not a bad iteration of the Tick. Every single iteration of the Tick kind of freaking rocks. Like every show rocks, every cartoon rocks. They're all great. The Tick just kind of rips. I love it. Love all about it. Let's give me more Tick, please. I want more Tick in my life. I'm still butthurt we don't have a season 3 of that show on Amazon. Just because it's like, it was the perfect it came out at like the right time where we can like rip on superhero stuff. And it was just like, yeah, like we have the Marvel shit and the DC shit, and then like here's the Tick over here just being a goofy little show, and it's really fun and we like it so much. And it's crazy. I don't know. I want more. Because the Tick is just great. What a fun concept. Put it in a game, That'd be really fun. Same with this one. I kind of connected with like the Ninja Turtle thing, but I'm like, we could do an Usagi game, I don't think we ever would. We just did like an animated series and nobody really talked about it. But if you wanted to take like Ghost of Tsushima or something, like hardcore samurai world, and just put Usagi in there and do that story with all of his characters, all of his friends, all of the supporting cast, and tell that story in like a video game, that has major appeal. That could be something special that people like. It would be really cool to see. Usagi, again, We don't talk about it enough, but that's a very popular character that has its audience, and that audience would follow it into any media. And if we did like Samurai Rabbit taken seriously in a beautiful aesthetic, and people be like, "This is based on something," I'm sure I would say there's a larger chance that the crossover would come for Usagi, because it could be like the anime and manga crowd that like video games too. Because, like it or not, the anime and manga crowd is bigger than the comic book crowd. So if that's what we had to do in order to get an Usagi Yojimbo game, like the larger crossover, would be pretty cool. Would be pretty cool. I could see it working. I haven't watched that animated show that's on. What's it on? It's on Netflix, I think. I don't know. I want a 2D one that looks more interesting than just like updating the character. But come on, a game with that aesthetic that sells well. People like just animal versions of things doing different stuff that animal things don't normally do. That's one of the things that they could do. I think that would be a really fun thing to see. Now, here's one. We're kind of getting closer to the end here, but here's a very interesting one that I kind of love the idea of. R.I.P.D. Not really a book I loved, because it was kind of bad, and it had a movie that was bad. But if we're doing like a comic book game, separate missions, you work for the RIPD, and you go around, you hunt things that are dead. What's the premise again? Yeah, you hunt the dead things, or like creatures that come back from the dead and stuff like that. That is a comic book. That is a video game like that's fucking video games right there. Great idea. That would work so well. Oh my goodness. Like a Men in Black style video game is such a good idea too. And RIPD is just kind of like a rip on, Men in Black. But if they got to it, my goodness, it could be really fun. You could do something very special there. Because those characters, a lot like Hellboy, like that is the type of character and world that works perfectly for a video game. Like, yeah, people would want to play as them. People would want to see what else has to be said in this universe. It's very cool. It's not like the worst comic in the world, but I'd argue to say it's interesting. Maybe the concept would just work better on like a larger scale. And since we're talking about Dark Horse for a minute, Survival Street, I just want to see that. It's a modern comic book I just adore. I want a game where I can play as like a puppet that's a terrorist. That would be really fun for me, and I would appreciate to see what that could look like. Anyways, we are wrapping up here, but there's one more I kind of just want to talk about. It kind of goes back to like the larger scale of what I was saying with like the early Image characters. There's another like comic book universe that I think would be perfect for video game adaptation. That of course, is the Valiant universe of characters. Now, Valiant has always been a company on the outskirts of the outskirts. They are semi-popular. They have popular enough characters that people like to talk about and have reference for. We did get a Bloodshot movie, of course. But the thing is, they are very experimental too. They made like a YouTube series about their characters, which was fine. I remember watching it being like, yes, this is exactly how you should have handled all of this. And that's pretty cool. But the thing is, they got so many iconic characters at Valiant that are perfect for a video game. Like here's your lead character going into a world video game. Let's run through some of the characters of Valiant and the type of like concept they could be in. Not all of them, of course, just a couple. Exo Manowar. There is your hardcore science fiction game. You have a character who's got a suit that can talk to him, different types of weapons, do that kind of like vague whatever you want to do in space, or even on Earth, like here's a guy that can fly around and save the day. Shadow Man, you want to do like a dark world type of like horror vibe. Here's your like dark superhero. Perfect. Eternal Warrior. You could do so much with just making a barbarian style character. That is like classic video game stuff. Ninjak. It's Hitman, Here's like your secret agent ninja that could show up. Bloodshot, of course. There's your like more just like clear cut shoot 'em up game, that kind of guy. Faith Herbert, I think you could do something with Faith. She's kind of a fun character. Just I guess like that'd be like the most straightforward like Spider-Man adjacent game where you're just like following this character, doing something fun with her. Solar, that you could. I mean, I don't know if Solar's the route I would go, but you could do something with Solar if you wanted to. Archer and Armstrong, there's kind of like your more straightforward, just like dark, like here's the characters doing something like that. Kind of like the boots on the ground type of vibe. You want to go a little more like, comedic and crazy and do something a little more like goofy and over the top. Quantum and Woody. Get involved into some hijinks of Quantum and Woody. Psylords, if you wanted to play with the Psylords, I wouldn't, but you could do like Exo Manowar, Shadow Man, Eternal Warrior, Ninjak, Bloodshot, Quantum and Woody, Archer and Armstrong, Faith Herbert. You can make games out of all of those characters. They'd be afraid to, because how would you do that? But I feel like if there was one company that could really benefit from trying the video game thing, it's Valiant. Because you have different genres of characters. You could cross them over if you wanted to. Valiant could also do like a Mortal Kombat style game where like their characters fight each other if you wanted to. But like, who wouldn't want to play an Exo Manowar game? That would be such a fun concept. Such a cool thing to explore. There's something there. I don't know. I would like to see all of these games happen, but I really think like Valiant should try that. Like, I know they sold the movie rights to a bunch of different studios, and we may never see any of those see the light of day. But whatever they did with like the video game rights, I don't know what happened with those. I would be like contacting some like big company. I don't know any of the big companies. I would just be like, hey, the developers who did, I don't know, like, I don't even know what any of the games, like, what are, like, the popular games of the year? Let's look it up. Popular games. I don't play any games. What are, like, the kids playing these days? I don't know any of these. Starfield, that's, like, a big one. That might be a little too big. What am I looking for here? I don't really know what I'm looking for here, but if you wanted to contact, like, the people that did Hogwarts Legacy, let's just say that, for instance, to be like, hey, Exo Manowar, that could be kind of fun. I'm here for it. Great idea. A great idea if you wanted to attempt it. And you should. You all should. These are great ideas. They're fun concepts. We should explore more of these things. We should try more of these things. Let these things happen. Video games and comic books, they are symbiotic in some essence. A lot of video games get comic book adaptations. A lot of comic books are getting video game adaptations. But we should do those. Early Image, Valiant, The Tick, Elephant Men, R.I.P.D. The Max, Usagi, Battle Pope, Bone, Gen 13 if you wanted to. Let's do them all. Let's get some video games made of these guys. And then maybe people will go back and read the comic books. And then maybe I don't have to sit here and explain to you what the Tick is. Even though I could do a Tick if you wanted. If we wanted to do a Tick episode, we could. But I think Tick should speak for himself. And a video game just might be the way to do that. So, what do you want to see? Is there any comic book that you love and adore that you would like to see brought to a video game? I would have said Fables, but they already did The Wolf Among Us. And maybe when the second game comes out, I will have a console and we could talk about it and play it. And we'll see. That's a long ways off, though, for me and for that game. But thank you all for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And as always, I will catch you in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. Boo-doo-boo. Ba-doo-boo. Boo. I made that different enough where it didn't sound like the Mario theme, just because I'm like, yeah, I don't think I should do that. But see ya. Wouldn't want to be ya.